funny because I bring my notebook rather than a laptop, and people go, Doug, you're the CIO? And I go, old school, buddy.
Yeah, I like the hard copy.
All right, we're back online, folks. So for the folks that are attending the meeting, work session is a little bit different. It's open. The floor is open for questions and answers. So with regard to any participation, the folks that are attending the meeting are more than welcome and encouraged, to participate and ask questions and get clarification. So it's an open, it's an open meeting, and I would just ask, thank you, JB, I would just ask that you step up to the mic so that the folks listening in and the recording catches everything that you need to do. All right. So thanks to all of those involved, and I think, Steve, you kind of pulled everything together in a document. We wanted to take a look at all the things we have to date. There was a number of questions regarding the North Star proposal, the L&N's proposal, the comparison between the two. We're talking about function, we're talking about budget, we're talking about short-term stability, long-term stability, how we make this investment and how it benefits the Ocean Pines Association. So I don't want to go through and read all this. We've given everybody, in the public an opportunity to look at this document, but I think we just start with, I'll open the floor up. What discussion points? Let's start with, tell you what, do you want to go through it systemically, since these kind of questions kind of go through it? And
might as well.
Since we put it together,
yeah.
Everybody comfortable with that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So one of the questions was, do we approve the approach and invest in proprietary technology platform or OPAs at the mercy of the vendor's roadmap, or invest in open cloud-based, that free us from a single vendor? So who had that question?
That was my
question.
The thought behind asking this question is really important because it establishes the parameters around which we should be discussing the choices that are in front of us. Obviously, what we have had for years in this organization has been a proprietary single vendor solution. We know the pains that inflicted on the operation, on resources, not just in terms of the network and the servers and other technologies, but also in terms of people. The amount of time it takes to generate reports, the amount of time it takes to close monthly financials, et cetera. So the reason I have asked this question is because we need to decide if we really want to continue with that kind of a model, that approach. A single vendor, a single source solution, in my mind, is not desirable. If for no other reason, it's because we have had that kind of operation in place for years, and we know the disadvantages, not just from an operational point of view, but also of cost. The costs continue to go up, and we need to figure out a way how to run the operation from an IT perspective more efficiently, effectively, and also less expensive than what we've spent in the past. So my preference, based on this question, is really to go with, to stay away from the single source proprietary solution in order for us to avoid the problems that we've had in the past. So I'll turn the table over to my other colleagues to comment and share their thoughts on this.
Let me respond. I don't share the same approach, though, for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you look at proprietary, one could argue that anybody's system is proprietary. You bring an Oracle environment in, it's not built on open source code. You bring, any of the other big players so proprietary is a little bit of a misnomer in some cases. But you're looking at to point out our environment. What we're doing now is comparing a purpose-built environment to a custom design environment. Okay, LANSA is a development environment. Okay, and they developed a system around that. All right, which in and of itself ties you in to overhead for support that's not going to be within your organization. Okay, so it's an automatic added cost to that. The other part of it is when you have this purpose-built environment like what we're looking at right now, they've already addressed a lot of the things with regard to functionality. LANSA was built up, from what I understand, over time, and features are added, and that's the beauty of a development process, or development platform. But the idea of already having a set of business requirements and then matching those business requirements to a purpose-built software platform is a lot better in the long run, because you're not confined to that consistent support externally. So again, purpose-built versus custom design, you know as well as I do, you want to stay as far away from custom as possible, all right? The more you have, the more customized the system is, the more institutional knowledge is external to the internal staff and puts you at higher risk, okay? You've got that one resource that has the proverbial keys to the kingdom and that institutional knowledge that we all know gets documented very thoroughly and passed on to anybody to substantiate that, which obviously I'm being facetious here. But so I don't think it's an issue with regard to being tied into quote unquote proprietary. I don't look at that as a risk at all. Any questions for me? Did I see somebody raise their hand in the?
John had his hand.
John, did you have your hand up?
We're both on. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so I'm here as a homeowner. John Viola, 1 Montclair Court. First, I want to say, I see Tom's here, the TWG group, the board, the B&F committee, and anybody else that volunteered. As a homeowner, thank you for all the work, and JB and his team. Thank you for all the work you've all done on this. As a homeowner, and asking for other homeowners that I know that have come to me, I have one high-level question for now before you get into all this heavy work that you've done. We have a legacy system now. We have North Star that has been vetted and reviewed, and now we finally have an outsourcing company that gave us a bid. So we have 3 bids. We have 3 different scenarios. We have the cost. I've been told as best we can, we've compared them apples to apples. Yes? Yes? I'm looking to the board. Yes? JB? Yes? Okay. So with that at a high level, what I'm reading, what I'm being told, the numbers that I've gotten, and B&F has reviewed the North Star versus our legacy system, I'll call that what we have in-house now. What I was shown, the numbers that I was shown, or we were all shown, was that North Star is actually cheaper, apples to apples, to the system in what we have now. Is that correct? Yes? Mm-hmm. JB? Yes? Everybody's nodding? Everybody agrees on that table?
Yep.
Frank?
Not sure.
Not
Okay,
sure.
The reason that we're having this meeting, John, is there are still some open questions
Okay.
that I think, at least in my mind, and maybe I'm the only doggone person in Ocean Pines this way, that precludes an apples-to-apples comparison. And I've gone through tons of information, and people have been very forthcoming in the information, and some of the questions basically, in my mind, still were unanswered, and that's why we're meeting, is to get to the bottom and make sure that if we go with North Star, that it is the best value to meet our needs. If we don't go with North Star and we look at an outside proposal, it happens to be from L&M, that's the best thing to meet our needs. And right now, I think there's a question in one or more minds up here as to specific related to each system. And then when we get the answers to completed for one system, then we can get the answers for the second system and do an apples-to-apples comparison. And the general manager and his team have rightly and fairly asked us to make that decision in 45 days, and we're committed to doing that. And I can speak for myself, and I think there's a unanimity up here in this group. We understand the need for new software. We also understand that it's going to take 20% of our reserves, and we want the thing to be right coming out of the gate. And if it's not right, we want adequate escape methods so we're not tied down as we are today.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, I'd like to hear from everybody as a homeowner.
So, Frank, I want to make sure I clarify your statement. 20% of the reserves. How do you get at that number?
That's the number that I heard at the Budget and Finance Committee meeting.
Well, okay. Because for clarification, it's like
Where's it coming from?
the idea is, and unless the numbers, maybe this is where we need to clarify things. The reserves are at what, 6 million or whatever it is.
$6 million for replacement.
Yeah, $6 million for replacement, and we're talking about spending $384,000, give or take a few, on the implementation and first-year costs. So I'm trying to figure out how we got at 20% of the reserves.
I would defer that answer to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Unless there was a conversation about $1 million over 6 years, I guess you could extrapolate that.
Yeah, but-
type of comment.
But the reserve would also grow
That's
over those
not-
6 years
that's
too. I guess I want to make sure that since we're in very kind of open public discussion, I just want to make sure that when you state with 20% of the reserves, if I didn't have anything else other than that statement, I think a red flag would go up. So I think what we need to do is qualify that. The answer is right now, we're talking about with the numbers we have, give or take a few thousand, we're talking about $380,000, $390,000, okay, which we already have in reserves, in replacement reserves. It was identified in the reserve study. So I want to make sure that people don't come away with the fact that we're getting ready to make a decision that's going to take 20% of the reserves and get rid of it, okay? Because that's not true.
Somewhere along the way, and I'm not sure the history of TOG, why we picked 6 years to look at that. I understand why going out no more than 2 necessarily, but, I'm sorry, thank you. My comment was that I'm not sure, going back 2 or 3 years, why we picked 6 years to go out to get numbers like that. And that may have created some of the question of where the $1 million or the 20% and that type of thing.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah, I
sir,
hope so.
if you can.
So I'm here as a homeowner, but I do it now. I would like to hear the answer. I'd like to hear the answer after that.
Well, can I make, fortunately, we're, in this working session, we have both our treasurer and members of the Budget and Finance Committee. And since I, as a director, rely implicitly on their input when it comes to numbers, I would like them to speak in that capacity.
Go ahead, Tom.
The reality is, we took the 6 years because we didn't want to just do 2 and we didn't want to do 10. It was an arbitrary number that basically the intent was to say this was a long-term solution. This wasn't something you look at for a 2-year period. It's a longer-term period, and we speculated what the cost would be going forward in a rather detailed assessment, which was reviewed by our finance director, who agreed with all of the procedures and the numbers we were using for internal costs, allocating to these various offers that were involved in responding to the RFP. So the answer is there's no magic number. It could have been 5, it could have been 7, but we used 6.
Okay. Again, am I still okay as the homeowner?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
To be honest with you, to hear a question like that coming from the GM today, that concerns me a little bit,
It's not the GM's question.
to be honest with you, as a homeowner. I understand it, as if you want me to talk as the treasurer, I understand it, and I don't have a problem with 5 years or whatever, or the 6. But if I'm standing up here and I'm representing homeowners that have asked me, and I hear that, that's a concern. Just saying. And again, back to my original question.
If I may, John.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a concern of me asking.
Remember, I'm a homeowner.
Of me asking that question today.
Right.
You have to remember, I ask a lot of rhetorical questions, and I may know the answers to, but I need everybody else to know why.
Okay, good. Thank you. No, okay. Doug, to my original question?
Yeah,
As a
I
homeowner.
just,
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve.
I want to respond to your question,
Yep.
John, because you asked all the board to respond.
Yes, yes.
I've spent a lot of time reading a lot of documents this week, and I feel like the questions that are on the first page of this document that was just handed out have already been answered. I feel like we put together a TWG, the Budget and Finance has reviewed it, and I feel like we're past the point of talking about what's on the first page. We're really at a point of, do we go with L&N or do we go with North Star? We have questions about some aspects of North Star that have not been answered yet, and we have a session planned with them on the 14th of December where we will be able to ask those questions, and we can give them questions ahead of time to get further answers. But from my perspective, we're well past the first page of this document handed out, and we're ready to move forward either with North Star or L&N.
So, Steve, today you would be ready to make a decision if asked?
No, I'm not ready to make a decision. I want to get the additional questions that board members have related to L&N and to North Star. And once those questions are answered in the next 2 weeks, whatever it takes, then I'd be ready to make a decision.
Okay. Doug?
No, Esther.
Oh, I'm sorry, Esther.
Hi, John, homeowner.
Esther, how are you?
I'm chairing the meeting, by the way.
Are you sure? Okay. I'm not ready to make a decision yet. I'll be honest. I can't say that I'm ecstatic about either option, but this is what we have in front of us. I'm definitely not I'm happy about going into a 6-year contract, because if this is wrong, which it could be, we're going to be stuck in something that I don't want to be stuck in. It's not trying to delay this. I know people have, specifically may have accused me of trying to delay this. I'm not trying to delay it. I'm trying to make the right decision that we don't have to have this conversation a year from now and be, oh, we just blew $500,000 again. So trying not to do that. I'm not the IT person. I'll be the first one at this table to tell you I'm probably the most naive out of all. I'm between the two IT gurus over here. But I can tell you business-wise, I'm not certain about this yet.
Right.
At this point. And I'm talking more on a business financial side.
And I think that's good that you're bringing a business perspective. I really do. That's somebody there.
So Esther, one thing to carry on, you bring up a good point. We're not signing a 6-year contract. The 6-year timetable was to look at a financial analysis. Certainly we have every option to decide to go 2 years, 3 years, annual renewal, whatever we decide if we enter into a contract with North Star or any other vendor for that matter. So it's not that we're locked in to 6 years. We just use that for analysis. Okay.
Doug, my hand is up.
Colette, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on the remark you made about the contract. There are a lot of questions in this document that are contract specific. And, some of the questions are product specific. And I think we do need to separate those out, but we're not at the point of contract specific discussions until we decide which way we're going to go. I agree completely with Steve that we're ready to move on from page 1 to the other questions. But, I agree, make clear we're not signing a contract. We are at the stage of deciding which vendor we're going to negotiate a contract with, and we're going to address those contract issues at that point, which will be basically the job of the GM to do and counsel. Thanks.
John?
Well, I guess, I don't know, can I ask it? I might, Ted and Slobodan.
It's an open discussion.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to be the one.
This isn't public comments.
So Ted, I'd just like to hear, as a homeowner, Ted and Slobodan.
Ted, did you hear that? John would like to hear your response.
Well, my main thing here is this, that I believe, regardless of which direction we're going, the contract does matter, because we don't want to be locked. A lot of those questions have to do with what the final cost is and part of the final negotiation. So I think some of that stuff is part of making this decision and getting clarity, because I still believe we don't know the final numbers until we go to and get a number of the questions that we have asked answered. Are all the APIs in there? Is there any way we can get L&N to roll all those additional fees they have into a lump sum so we have something to compare? So it's a little hard to hear, but my tendency is we should come up with the questions for L&N, come up with the questions for North Star, make sure we get these things scheduled, get them answered, and then as close as we can to apples, be able to address it. And I know, certain things are unknowns for sure. For instance, with L&N, they were missing some of the back room stuff, so we added 115 at the end to try to get to apples, which is similar to what was added into North Star. But is 115 a number or just equating them? So I don't know if that's a good number or a bad number or not. So my personal position is to stay focused, to make sure that everybody sitting in that room understands we did the due diligence. Then here are the questions for North Star. Here are the questions for L&N. Let's make sure everybody gets everything answered, and then make a final decision based on that information. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Ted.
Slobodan, I think John was asking for your...
Well, John, I'll give you my 5 cents. Here's the way I'm looking at this topic. First of all, I personally believe it's wrong for us to talk about vendor, specifically North Star or Legum & Norman. I don't think we as a board should be spending our time this morning discussing vendor-specific topic. I believe what we need to really talk about is the difference between a single source solution, all-in-one kind of a solution versus best-of-breed solution approach. If we agree that that is the question for the morning to be answered, then we know that both Leggett-Norman and Northstar fall in a category of single-source solution, all-in-one encompassing solution. If that is not the road we want to take, then the discussion that's vendor-specific becomes a moot point. So let me just give you an example of what I mean by the question of single-source solution versus best-of-breed. One of the questions that I put forward was, which approach do we want to choose that will allow departments to select what's best to run their operations? We already know that Parks and Rec wants their own software. We know that Golf module offered by Northstar is not necessarily great, and I believe the Golf team would prefer a different solution. So if we do, as a board, decide that the best thing to do is to let department heads choose their solutions, because after all, they know how to run their departments. I would certainly not tell Colby what to select as best for them. So I would like to really encourage the board this morning to talk about, approach that's a single, all-in-one solution versus best of breed.
Right.
And I have certainly my own preference on which approach I believe is the best for the organization and for the community for the next 10 years.
Right. If I can keep going. Well, I noticed, JB, on the committee that was put together, or the team, or the work session, I heard Slobodan talk about, and rightfully so, the department heads and their input or whatever. How much input was there during this process from all the department heads or anybody on your team or employees of Ocean Pines were involved in this process throughout it?
Yeah, I can answer that. Hey, I see Brian Reynolds here. Brian, would you care to answer any of that? You were part and parcel of all this. Maybe you can step up to them. I'm putting you on the spot, but go ahead, because I'll have an answer as well.
Brian Reynolds, 148 Ocean Parkway, Technology Work Group volunteer. I was just scribbling some notes about the best of breed versus the single solution. Seems to me we're already headed into a best of breed situation. For example, I was just looking into paperwork here. Public Works likes their net facilities application. Sounds like it's doing a lot of stuff that they need it to do. Goff, they want to stick with EasyLink. Slobodan pointed that out. We got a point of sale system at the food and beverage operations that seems like ORT wants to maintain. So in my opinion, what we're looking at for the rest of it is the administrative functions that we're going to get out of Northstar. Membership, marketing, calendaring, and scheduling, and things that Northstar will bring to the table. So I think we're already headed down that road, and maybe we shouldn't be focusing with Northstar being the do-all and end-all. We're already looking at some other apps that we're going to need to integrate with them.
Yeah, let me.
Doug, I still have it.
Go ahead.
I got to be honest with you, I don't think he answered. It was good stuff.
Yeah, I'll have
He
an
didn't
answer.
answer. He didn't answer the question.
Yeah, I put him on the spot.
No,
That's
it was
okay.
really good stuff. And look, I know this man has done a lot of work and good work, but that did not answer my question.
So let me answer the question. So we started out with the concept of best of breed versus single source environment. We've been down that road already. Back in October of 2016, when the TWG started, one of the things that they did was go out and have meetings with every one of the department heads to discuss their business needs and their business requirements. It's fully documented. Their responses, what they wanted to see, and what they needed in order to do their operational responsibilities. That gestated into evaluation criteria, which in turn, and I'll point this, give you the visual reference, this was this thing that came out. These were all the requirements that came from the meetings with the staff and the department heads who are responsible for it. It wasn't driven by the TWG. It wasn't driven by an outside vendor trying to sell their product. It was driven internally by the discussions in a very straightforward discovery, okay? And all those who've done big projects, discovery, fit gap, evaluation, implementation planning, migration planning, production environments, long-term support. That's how it works. okay? So those pieces were done already. And to suggest that we have to go back and redo the concept, I get your concept, but my point is it's already been asked and answered, okay? Now, with regard to single service or, single vendor approach, the fact that they have APIs, all right, which are application programming interfaces, it allows the two programs to talk to one another, exchange data, and synchronize as necessary, suggests that we will need a best-of-breed approach. We're already there. For example, we may have to look and say, does the golf, easy links, is that really what we want to have? I'm a little non-supportive of people telling me, the operational side saying, this is the software we want. Don't tell me what the solution is. Tell me what you do, and the solution will get matched to what you do, all right? Because if we start out, with the software, then you don't have any business processes. You didn't explain to me what your business process was, what your requirements are, right? And that came out, again, as part of those original discussions that were had. So all this information is available. And again, after vetting and so on and so forth, here we are with the analysis by a lot of people. There were 9 people on that TWG with collective 100+ years worth of experience. So it's not like you had just, a couple of people down at the local pub and you brought them in to have a discussion, all right? So, I'm fully confident that it was vetted and those requirements were understood and translated into a solution. So, I don't want to go back to, do we have to have a best of breed versus that? We've already done that. We've already moved forward. There's a lot of things that have already been asked and answered. What I'd rather focus on is a couple of the specifics, and Frank, to a couple of your points, because you have a couple of good questions here, and I think hopefully once we get an answer to, we'll clear up a lot of the, the unfamiliarity with what's going on. But John, I don't know if, was there something specific you wanted me to cover with an answer?
No. I didn't ask if we were doing best in breed or single source or what. I didn't ask that. That generated outside of me. That wasn't even part of my question.
Doug, let me,
But
if I may,
with that said,
to your question, I have a comment, okay?
yeah. Okay, but that wasn't my question, that best in breed.
I know.
Okay.
I'm trying to get to your question.
Thank you.
Okay, which was the departmental questions. There was a whole section of the TWG work where they, as Doug was saying, talked with all the department heads and talked about functions and all of these types of things. That's all in this piece of document. The other part is when we did do the demos, the department heads were involved in each one of those.
Right.
Specifically for their section of whatever the software that was.
Ruth Ann was doing membership.
Right.
We had Jonas and Yardi and North Star, and I think there was one other one, I can't remember which.
So what the GM and the president, to my simple question, and all I asked was, did we involve the department heads or anybody that would be key to this process? That's all I was looking for, yes. Were they part of the team that just reviewed the outsourcing documents and everything else? It didn't look to me that they were.
Well, the outsourcing, remember, was for financial management services. And so there were 4 people involved in that review, the assistant treasurer, another person.
So you were comfortable with it and your department heads were comfortable? Just yes or no?
Finance.
Yeah. I'm just looking for simple answers.
That, to me, that answers that.
Okay, so the answer is?
When you're dealing with the financial management piece, it didn't necessarily need to involve all the department heads.
Okay. So the answer is it was not needed, already helped, and they all are familiar with it.
For that review.
Okay, so what came up with this, the question I have is that everything was done, and there's 27 pages, and it was all reviewed. Being part of the BNF, that we vetted this twice with North Star, could somebody on this board tell me what is the solution for golf with North Star? Slobodan, could you tell me?
I can tell
It's
you
just
that.
yes, no, or this
Well,
is it.
Yeah. Listen, this is not a courtroom, and there is no yes or no answer. I prefer
No,
to
but I don't want to tie
elaborate.
everything up. Then I don't want to be that
prefer
I'm
to
asking 100
elaborate.
questions. I just want to know, does
John, let
everybody
me-
know the solution?
You asked, let me elaborate.
Yeah, sure.
Okay? I read the review on North Star Golf module that was on the internet, and the review was very negative. So my reaction to that is I prefer to let John Malinovsky, who knows golf operation, decide what's best for the golf. I don't golf, I have no idea. That's why I'm in favor of best of breed approach and letting department heads decide how to run their operations, because if we force something upon them, and I understand where Doug is coming from with his statement, but let me say this, if we force something upon them to use and it turns out that they start having problems, who are we going to blame? Are we going to blame the board for telling them to use software X? Is the board going to take the responsibility and accountability, or are we going to deflect back on the department and say, make it work? I don't subscribe to that management. So my personal opinion on this as an individual director is I like the approach of best of breed, and another term used in the marketplace is actually best in class.
Right.
And there is, here's the thing, when you start peeling the orange,
Right.
and you start looking at these individual departments and what they prefer to use, what is left out of this all-in-one solution that's offered by Legam and Norman or by Northstar that we would actually be interested in?
Right.
And here's where the core of the problem is. Back office, best-in-class ERP platform. Do we, as an association, want to bet our entire back office operation, accounting, budgeting, financial management, purchasing, HR, payroll, on a small private company player that we have no really clear understanding about their capabilities, or do we want to select best in class? Industry agnostic solution, global players like the likes of Microsoft, Oracle, Sage. I just read Sage review on their back office application. Guess what? Endorsed as a preferred solution by the Association of Certified Public Accountants.
Slobodan, are you introducing a new solution here today?
No, actually what I'm introducing is reinforcing as a board person that I am in favor of a best of breed approach. However, when it comes to the back office, we have not really vetted properly all the solutions. We have instead ended up focusing on Northstar because it was brought before us based on the procurement process initiated by the technology work group, which the board had really it never came to the board for a vote, for approval. But let me tell you, I'll go on record. There is no way, as an individual director, I would vote in favor of turning over our back office operation, our entire financial and accounting and everything else that this association needs to run on a small niche player, which is basically what this company is: club management, hospitality, niche player.
Okay, thank you.
I'll
be honest with you, I just, again.
Wait a minute, I can make something short and sweet. John, you asked a very specific question. What is it with golf?
Yes.
Here's a comparative analysis. Under Northstar, yes, all-inclusive with tee times, okay?
So that's the Northstar, Doug, I'm sorry, so they were recommending, or if we went with Northstar today, you're saying we'd be using the Northstar solution for golf and not EasyLinks?
As of right now, yes. However, we could negotiate that to decide whether or not the full functionality of tee times is associated with all the things that they need.
And that will work, JB, you signed off on that?
That is, the whole golf issue is a little bit more complicated, shall we say. So it's because of the EasyLinks use of that system in this area, specifically Ocean City, et cetera, and the package play issue, and being able to get ease of tee times and all of that, that complicates the question about golf. So those are questions that we need to go back to Northstar, go back to LNN, and ask specifically, all right, how does Northstar's golf tee time system, for example, work in relation to what we need in this area?
Okay, so we don't have the solution yet for golf.
We haven't resolved some of the questions about golf. Northstar has the capability of doing it.
Right.
And I would say this, if we were not in Ocean City and dealing with the whole EasyLink and the package place type of stuff, then it would be easy to go to Northstar.
Right.
I have questions about the whole EasyLink piece. What can Northstar complement that or replace that or not?
Right.
Or do we need to say that particular piece of Northstar we don't want?
Right.
We want to keep EasyLinks. Do you have the API?
Right. So if we kept to stay with your
that's a question.
Right.
Still.
To stay with your comment, So if you decided, or your team or this board decided that Easy Links was the answer, how would that work with North Star? Would they support it, or would they refuse?
That's the question, that's one of the questions.
So
we
that's
have
an
Brian
unsolved
Lexman.
question. So right now, so golf is one of our major amenities,
Right,
major,
that's why I still a question.
major dollars, and we don't have a solution for that. Frank, I think
No,
you
we
have your
have a
hand.
solution for
Yeah, I'm
it,
gonna,
but
we have a
it's
solution.
cool.
All right,
Okay.
Esther, go ahead.
John, I understand all your questions, I do, and I understand the depth of them. I'm just going to be real blunt about it. We have a whole list of questions for both L&N and North Star. I know you want the answers, and I'm just being honest.
No, I don't want it,
I'm just saying
no.
that we have a lot of questions
Right.
that have to be answered.
No, I'm getting
think
what I
that-
want.
I think the department heads have really been involved in this. I'm not trying to sound cold, but I'm going to just be business, as I always am. Can't make everybody happy. It's impossible. I can
Right.
try to make all my department heads happy, and I
Right.
can't.
Right.
All right? So I think the first thing is, we're going to finish our due diligence on the two plates that are in front of us. Get all the questions answered. It has to do this in a systematic way, okay? And then we can say, okay, either one of these viable option? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't have that answer right this second. I do definitely feel that the department heads have been involved, and they should stay involved and give their input, because they're using it at the end of the day. But I think, and I don't want to diminish your questions, but I just think
Oh, you're not
we're a little-
going to,
We're a
believe me.
little bit premature, because we have a lot of questions.
But that's
that
fine,
we're
no,
waiting
I
to be
got, yeah,
answered.
I'm a homeowner, remember?
Yeah, so we're waiting to be answered.
Okay, that's great.
By these two organizations.
So
And
then
I-
this board is not ready today,
I
and it
feel
doesn't
that's-
sound like you're
Yeah.
close to it either.
Yeah, not deciding.
And not even close. Okay,
It's not- I
Frank?
can't say not close, John. I can say that we have a list of questions that have been compiled that have to be answered.
Okay.
So I say we're closer than we were.
That's good.
Frank?
Frank, are you, go
Let
ahead,
me
Frank.
try to give the specific, okay? Since well before my election on the board, I asked for and I've received from the TWG information about the discussions that they had with the department heads, okay? I'm not a bit and byte guy. When it comes to computers, this is as smart as I get, and I don't know all the capabilities of this. But I have put in enterprise-wide systems in huge divisions of what is now Northrop Grumman. And I am not satisfied. First, I am satisfied. We've answered the question. We didn't even have to ask it. North Star answered it for us. We are going best of breed. We're going best of breed because they told us. We didn't ask them. They told us if we wanted an HR module, we had to go elsewhere. We have Mad Work Group asking for Toast, which is a point-of-sale system. We have, they have told us in writing that if we want to link project management cost with project management activity, that we have to go elsewhere. They have told us that we need Sage for asset management, okay? We have unanswered questions in Public Works where they've said things like, Gas Buddy's no longer supported, we have a facilities program that we like, okay? I've heard, but until right now haven't had confirmed, that golf wanted to go on a different package with Easy Links. I've just had in writing this week from another board member that Parks and Recreation wants to go with RecWire. My question from day one, long before I was elected to this board, is this. I am willing to accept North Star as a best-of-breed solution for our amenities. It is used by top flight clubs around the United States, okay? How do these other things link in with it? What else is required? How much is it going to cost us, and when are we going to get them? Because there's more cost here than the $1 million over 6 years. I mean, intrinsically, some of this may be included, but I know that some of it isn't. The other thing that I have a big issue with in terms of what we've gone through with a forensic audit and what we've gone through with deep dive audits and everything else, when somebody's using RecWire in Parks and Recreation and they book a transaction, how does that transaction get into the core system of North Star? Is it done automatically at the speed of light? Does North Star have to ask it for a download? Does somebody have to remember to do it and ask it for it? Because if this isn't all linked, we're going to spend $1 million, and I don't see where we're going to improve us one damn move.
I'm sorry, say that last part? Not improve?
Not improve us one step. Okay? I mean, it should be. I mean, I know the technology's out there. I just want to know how it's done, and it's not clear in my mind. That's why I have the questions. Once those questions are answered, then it's going to be easy to compare A to B.
If I could, Tom Terry, 401 Blue Water Court. There have been a couple comments made at the table that I think are very valuable. One is when we have department heads, not all of them are going to be happy with whatever decision you come up with, and it's your job to lead. You are going to put in place software, and they might have to change software. They might have to learn new procedures. If you look at the report from the Technology Working Group, it clearly states that there are internal processes within Ocean Pines that are old, ancient, and have run their course. And that's how they work today. And those things have to change. In order to change, to take advantage of any new software that is state-of-the-art today, you have got to be willing to change the way you do things. So when a department head says to me or anyone else, I don't like that software because I already love the one I've got, well, why do they love the one they've got? Because they already know where the boxes are. They already know where all the steps are. Transition is painful. You're not going to, and I've talked to some of the department heads myself. I'm not going to sit here and tell the department heads the transition to a new system is going to be easy. It's going to be painful. I don't care what you choose. Transition from an old procedure that you're used to using for 20 plus years is not going to be easy. So let's understand that when the Technology Working Group went out, and Doug, you hit it on the nose, they didn't go out to buy software. They went out to evaluate Ocean Pines. They have well over 200 years worth of knowledge, by the way, not just 100 worth of knowledge. And they interviewed folks for what they functionally do. And that group then came up with the list of requirements that was built into an RFP, and which led to the responses that we got. We didn't do outsourcing. We stopped at the level of software and technology interfacing. It was the job of the Technology Working Group to bring to the Board of Directors its best thought of what ought to be done. We did not get to the level of contract negotiations, which a lot of these questions are, and they're very valuable questions. Frank, everything you just said is absolutely correct. All of those questions need to be answered and would have been answered if we had been allowed to take the next step with North Star, which would have been a real deep dive into everything they're doing, into their response to the RFP. It's pretty intensive already, but the bottom line is there was another layer to be done, and you guys are trying to do that layer, and I endorse that you go do that. Take that next layer. But the idea that we need to start all over again as if we never talk to the department heads or that a department head likes the software they've got. I mean, there are people who work here who know there's nobody more supportive of the staff of Ocean Pines than I was. Nobody defended them more. But in this particular case, they're going to have to accept change, and they're going to have to learn new procedures. And that's just something they're going to have to get used to. And you guys are in the right track, in my opinion. The Technology Working Group did their job. You have our report. We respectfully chose the North Star solution over other solutions. But I enforce again, we did not look at outsourcing. That wasn't our job. We did not do that. Now, the only other thing I will add at this point is when it comes to outsourcing, make sure that you're looking at apples-to-apples comparisons, because the North Star solution and the proposal from the TWG was to create as ubiquitous as possible a platform so that when data is entered at one location in Ocean Pines, as best as possible, that information would automatically, at the speed of light, end up in the other systems. That was what was suggested. That was what was proposed. I can't sit here and tell you that North Star is going to do every single keystroke that way. But we were never given the authority to go to the next level with North Star. That's where you are. You're going to that level, and that's exactly where you ought to go. So as far as I'm concerned, the outsourcing piece, just make sure it does the broad approach. Make sure you're not fixing one little part, although an important part, of the organization. And you're back again to, well, you then got to go pay somebody to build the platform for all of these individual software packages that everybody's in love with, you're right back where you are now. That's what you have today, is a system made up of individually non-integrated systems that are using a platform that is supported out of a very small company that does not have the support, or quite frankly, what I found was they were anything but supportive of Ocean Pines when I got involved with the process. So, speaking for TWG and the 200-some years of knowledge they've got, they did their job. The report that you have in front of you was written based on their work, and they're the experts in these things. But I think the step you're trying to take is exactly what, to be honest, we wanted to do, but we never got authorized to go to the next level. So that's where we are.
All right, Tom, and really, thank you. That doesn't count towards my questions and my time and all that. A lot of people, I think what's happening here is it's opening a floodgate for everybody. I didn't intend that for that. I just had a couple simple questions. Right. And I was just trying to get, and I didn't mean it was not a law. I was just trying to keep it short. But I think there's so much more here. And believe me, I'll stand here all morning if you want, I'm sure. But here's the thing, and I don't diminish my questions, and you're not going to be. Here's my point. I'm hearing a lot of things, I'll call it stuff today, that I really thought the box would have been checked and it was done. I really, really believe that that should have been done. Now,
John, can you give me an example?
The golf. The golf. Again, I wanted to keep this high level. The golf, honestly, I've heard all different solutions for the golf. I've heard that we're going to go with this one breathe or whatever, which is North Star with their golf. I heard somebody else tell me it was going to be Easy Links. JB's answer kind of contradicted yours, Doug, and that's a major piece in whatever we do is the golf. And we don't have a solution. And you can answer it. And believe me, I just don't want to be said that I'm tying it up. It's opening a floodgate here, though. And when Tom just mentioned that his team, which did a lot of work, and I do not question it, that they weren't allowed to go to the next stage on North Star, and all this that's coming out now, which are good questions. I got to be honest with you. From somebody on BNF, and I sat here 2 times vetting that North Star system, and I really believed that there was a lot of good work there, but I didn't get comfortable answers that I was asking back then. And now to hear that I was asked to sign off on that, and we didn't even go to the next stage, now I'm like, I'm just like, I'm sorry.
Okay. Couple things.
You're not ready.
Yeah.
This is major. Now, and then I'm going to sit down. There is a paradigm shift in Ocean Pines with expenses. It's no more pick on 50 golfers or the golf course or whatever. You got a major expense here, whether it's 20% or whatever. It's millions of dollars. And it's going to affect this budget for several years to come, the decision that's made here today. And I got to be honest with you, just like I came out of the 2 BNF reviews, you may have the answer, but it's certainly not articulated here today. And I believe you do have the answer, Doug, I really do. Yeah. But I'm telling you, walking out of here as a homeowner today, I'm not comfortable, but I'm telling you all, there's a paradigm shift in your expenses for Ocean Pines. Forget about the golf course and the 50 golfers, you can blame that with the rhetoric. What you're doing here today and the expenses and the budget effect that this is going to have is way different than, cleaning up a sand trap or whatever. So I sincerely hope that we make the right decision. And I believe you will. And I believe some of you do. But I'm certainly not hearing it today, Doug.
So I want to respond, but I also have respect for the rest. So Esther was next, and then I think.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
And then I'll answer.
Yeah, and I'll stand. Go ahead. Okay, I'm sorry if I went out of turn.
Go ahead.
So a couple things. Let's take a short, sort of a focused one, and then the bigger picture. The focused one is there is a solution for golf. Okay. Right now, it's the module that's included with North Star. Okay, and it goes back to whether or not we decide to adopt that. That becomes an operational issue, and it goes back to one of the things that Tom said. All right, I had staff come in and take a look at it. They got a preference. For example, let's say it cost me $100 a month to run that fully integrated, okay, golf environment, okay? But in order to continue to use tee times, it costs me $200 a month, plus external support to support the API to keep going back and forth between the two systems, and now I've added extra costs. So am I going to have a department head tell me that I have to spend $200 or twice the amount and increase my risk just because they like the way the screen is laid out on the console? The answer is no, okay? Where they could make a point is this software that I'm currently using does this. The new one doesn't, right? That's a valid point, and that's where the decision gets made, okay? So the idea of saying that we don't have a solution for golf is incorrect. We do have a solution for golf. We also have an option for golf. The solution is use the North Star one. The option is, should we compare it against, the phone just beeped.
Okay, Doug,
should we
this is
compare
good.
it, I guess
Go
maybe
ahead,
I'm
Doug,
getting, am I
please,
using
go
up my
ahead.
time? Is that it?
No, go ahead.
And compare it against, the functional requirements for that. Then that's something that we get to, when we do that comparison. But to categorically state that there's no solution is incorrect. Let me also, I reached out to.
Doug, I think the answer is there's been no decision.
Yeah, the question is, there is a solution.
Right.
There isn't a decision on whether or not we want to exercise one of the
Right,
options.
but at this point,
Okay?
2 years in, I would have thought we would have had it. If we go into any
Well,
type of
so let me
contract
answer-
and
get
we
to
don't
my
have that
bigger-
answer, it's going to cost us more later.
Yeah, but the bigger picture, we talked about, you mentioned the next level, okay? The next level
Yeah, I heard that
was
tonight.
proposed back on April 28th of 2018 in a board meeting.
Right.
When the TWG came and said, we recommend that we move forward with North Star, and the board at that time decided that they didn't want to move forward. So that next step that Tom was talking about would have been, now we move forward with North Star, with the concept of accepting the recommendation from the TWG. At that point, that's where the contract negotiations start. It doesn't mean we were signing a contract that day. It means we took that next step and say, now we have to get into the details that a lot of these questions actually come up. How long do we want the contract for? What are the integration costs with regard to any APIs that are needed for functions that require an external resource? Looking at the number of transactions, so and so, all of that, and it could have ended up being that, even though the TWG suggested North Star, after getting into the contract negotiation phase, it was too cost prohibitive to do that. That could have been one of the potential outcomes. So and Tom, I hope I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but from my perspective, that's what we needed to do. Because I think, to clear the air, the fact that we accept North Star doesn't mean we signed the paper and the ink gets dry. Now we get to the next phase of looking at it and making sure that we refine the process, that we refine the questions, that we refine everything that we have so that we're sure that all of these integration points that you're talking about, especially with golf, get answered. The same thing can happen with Recware. The same thing can happen with the POS system, okay? Those discussions are being had. One of the approaches would be, you know what, Matt Orr, I'm not saying this will happen, Matt Orr Company, we hear you. We think Toast is we understand, we've done our research, but you know what? Because of the cost involved, we want to use this system, all right? We would negotiate with them and find out exactly what it is. Here's our perspective, here's your perspective, here's our perspective. Let's negotiate and find out where we need to be. And that, I can see that happening elsewhere. So, I just say, again, from the short and the long term, short is, yes, we have a solution for golf. Long term.
But you don't have a decision.
Right, and that's what that next level is, because there's no sense spending any time on it until we endorse the fact that we want to move forward with it. Okay? So, I'm sorry, Esther was next, and then
Okay.
Slobodan and Frank.
Where do I begin? Okay. You guys have been talking about this for 2 years. I will say the one thing Ocean Pines does well is we beat the crap out of every subject, I'll give us that. The problem is that we have boards that change over every year. That's part of our problem. That's another conversation for another day, but that is part of the problem. Okay? We all can't do anything about that right now, but that is an issue. Could have, would have, should have. I'm not minimizing it, John. I don't care. I don't care what we should have, would have. I want to know where we are today. So now I'm going to deter to JB, and these are yes or no questions. Have you talked to your staff about their needs? Do you understand the department needs for every department? Yes. Okay. At the end of the day, the leadership is on you, not us. We're here to make a decision if we want to take his suggestion of software, okay? Not ours. We can give all the input in the world. At the end of the day, it's his job. It's your job to lead. It's your job to make sure that your department has, whether they like it or not, this is what we're using, this is what we're doing. Right or wrong, okay?
I'm totally with you.
There are some more questions that I have, and yes, I'm one of the ones who threw a kink into the North Star thing, and I say that publicly
I don't think you
because
did throw a kink.
I was one of the ones that wanted to say, hold up, because I do believe, and still do, that outsourcing in today's business society is a very commonplace thing, a cost-saving thing, and had to be explored further before I could vote when I came in on North Star.
I support you on that.
I understand the frustration of the community. I understand the frustration of the board and of the GM as well as the department heads. And I understand that everybody wants a decision. Believe me, I want to stop talking about it too. I want a decision. But
No.
I'm hoping that the ultimate decision of what we're going to use falls on you, JB. It is your job to bring to us, this is, guys, what I've dissected and what I think, and then it's our job to decide if we're going to approve it or not. It's black and white. It doesn't have to be this complicated, at least in my opinion.
I agree with you.
All right, so I feel that JB knows his departments, he knows what he needs. We're going to have the presentation, we're going to get our questions answered, and then bring us what you feel is the best option. End of subject, move on. Sorry.
Well said.
All right. So
Well
we had
said. So then-
Slobodan and then
I'm sorry.
Frank and then Colette. I got to
Yeah.
give the floor.
Yeah, bring
Slobodan.
them in.
So, few remarks. To John's point, it's a work session. We are actually having a discussion, a very important discussion that's transparent, so the membership is aware of how the board views this topic. Individually we have our opinions, but we really as a board have not gotten together to have this kind of a discussion, and doing it today, I think it's very important. Second point, I understand what my colleague Esther said about what JB's job is, and that he needs to bring the recommendation to the board. Where I see a difference is I prefer not to for JB to ask the board to vote on a Ford or a Chevy. I don't think the board should be voting on a vendor. I think the board should be voting on what's the best business approach and approve the budget. But I think it is up to JB as a GM to decide whether it should be a North Star, South Star, West Star, East Star, or Ford or Chevy. So that's my second point. I'd like to, as a board, I prefer to stay away from the vendor choice and let that be the GM's decision. And if it doesn't work out, then the board is going to hold him accountable for the choice he's made. A third point I'd like to make, and this is related to what Frank said earlier about North Star being a good club management software. I have no issue with North Star being looked at from the operational perspective for anything that's front office related. And I think many of us know what we mean when we talk about front office. Where I have issue with North Star is looking at them for a back office, for our ERP system. And this is where I get uncomfortable. I prefer that for a back office, we choose an industry-accepted solution that's been in the marketplace for a very, very long time, that gets updated very frequently using the best that the marketplace has to offer. And that is where my biggest concern is. And you, as a former person in financing, background, I'm sure you understand and will be sympathetic to a question of should the corporation take a risk from a very small privately held company to run its back office operations, whether it's finances, budgeting, accounting, or should we select a robust industry accepted solution that's going to, and I'm reading a case study from one of the customers that actually accepted industry-wide back office solution. The software paid for itself in a few months. He saved over $75,000 in headcount annually. He cut the closing time, monthly closing time, in half. These are the kind of things, that I think what we are looking for achieving in selecting the right back office solution. So I hope today, by the time we wrap up our work session discussion, we will have either agreement or disagreement whether we should look at for a niche player like North Star to run a back office or not. And like I said earlier, I have huge concerns in looking at them for a back office. I prefer to go with an industry players, leaders in this back office space. It's a question of cost, a question of risk, question of support. I brought up the issue of their support out of India. We don't know how much they're familiar with a nonprofit accounting software that's U.S.-based. So these are all, business concerns that we all need to be aware of, and then make sure that we are not putting the organization at risk by selecting somebody that really is not the best fit for our back office functions.
I got Frank and then Colette.
Hey, Doug, can I go, because I'm going to run? But I do have.
All right, Larry, go ahead.
Listen, I really just have two comments. First, let's remember what got us here. And Doug, you're absolutely right. Last April, a recommendation was made for North Star. Then the allegations of this gigantic fraud and corruption in the back office, $1 million loss. We now know that's not the case. And here we are again. Because of that, prior board members wanted to look at outsourcing. That's been done. I don't think the bid numbers have been put out there yet. Am I correct, JB? So that information's still...
Yeah, the dollars figures are not there.
Okay. So, so the RFP went out. The numbers came back. The group looked at it, and led by JB, Esther, a recommendation has been made already. You just got done telling him you're looking for him to make a recommendation. You have his recommendation, okay? If I know Frank wanted to slow down, get his questions answered. You guys decided 45 days. That's fine. Get your questions answered, but we've got to stop beating this dead horse. Make a decision and go forward. Now, there's one other comment I wanted to make, and again, the reason I didn't want to ask about the numbers is that, it hit me after looking at the RFPs, and this is just my personal view, after looking at it and seeing the disparity in the numbers, I had to wonder why between the two companies that we're looking at now. And I just had some landscaping work done at my house. I had some bids come in, and one guy was twice as much as the other guy. And it reminded me a long time ago that when you see a bid like that, it may be that they don't want the work. So I just want to bring that point to you when you're looking at these proposals, that the one bid is so high that maybe they don't want the work. That's just a comment I wanted to bring to you.
It's valid.
Thanks.
Right. Frank?
First, a lot of good, from my perspective, a lot of good discussion, and I'm certainly glad that John and Larry and others have spoken from the homeowner's point of view. This is where I think we're at, unless I misunderstand what has been asked of us. We have been asked as a board within 45 days to make a go or no-go decision regarding software next year. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
to accept the recommendation to keep it in-house and use North Star.
Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, I 100% agree that is an operations decision. I mean, I just think that we have past boards and past history has proven when we get into, as a board, talking about the price of a hamburger or anything, that it leads to an unmitigated disaster. Okay, so here's my expectation. You want me to vote in 45 days? I can vote in 3 days. This is what I want. From North Star, this is everything that we need to run an end-to-end system, fully integrated, no manual downloads, and this is the cost savings and cost. As an alternative, this is Legume and Norman to do the exact same thing. Here are the $2. Okay, here's the length of the contract. Here's the return on investment. I get that, I'm ready to vote. Until I get that, I'm not ready to vote for anything.
Colette?
Thanks, Doug. We've been talking for over an hour, and a lot of good discussion has come out. I think we've gotten to the point where the discussion is becoming redundant, and I want us to refocus on what our objective for today is. Right, I'm hearing that we have close to a consensus on the best of breed option, and that we are looking versus Whigham and Norman. There are very specific concerns about product-specific issues related to the needs of the departments, and there are very specific concerns about the contract terms that we want to make sure are in place. So what do we want to walk away with today? I think we're at the point where we need to come to some kind of, list of questions, list of points. We've got a document with a lot of questions. Is the expectation that we winnow down these questions, give them to the GM to make sure they get answered in these demos? I think we're at the point of pulling this together and setting us on the path of the next step of this deeper examination of the options that are set before us. Thanks.
And Ted had his hand up. Ted? He sent me a text with a thing like that.
I'm going to kind of go and follow right on with Colette. The whole purpose of this meeting is we didn't have all the answers in order to make a decision. The purpose of the meeting was to pull together those areas that we had questions on for both methods of outsourcing or in-house, and narrow that scope of questions. So if stuff had already been asked and answered, we could scratch it off the list. We were then going to take those lists, get to the two vendors so that they had a chance to look at it before they made the presentation, make sure that staff and everybody else, if you look at section 2, question 4, were in there and got a chance to ask their questions, meet the vendors, get the answers, compare the answers, and then make a decision. So to me, the real question comes down to here. Are we missing questions in here? Are there other things we need to identify and ask the vendors and pull this document together and get it off to the two people we need answers from? That's it.
Yeah, let me also add something too. I took the liberty of reaching out to North Star, and I asked them, and so this was based on the questions you had because it interested me about the size of some of the clients that they have. And I got an email late last night, and this is from what was this guy's name? Jim Wisniewski. Okay, he's the director of sales for North Star, and I said, I get to understand some of your clients so we can do a comparative analysis. Let me read this. One of our largest clients, so large that perhaps only their website will do it justice. Robson Communities, 8 properties, approximately 70,000 homes, multiple clubhouses, multiple country clubs, multiple tennis operations, all upscale, all operating under one platform. And the contact there is Jack Sarzum, the Senior VP of Operations. He also had, the next is a little smaller, 6,500 homes in Sun City and Huntley, Illinois. And I guess he does things in threes. About 3,000 homes, Pine Mountain Club in Fraser Park, California. So it gives it, to your point about, the size, which I think is a very valid question. I think this more than answers it. If you got a community with 70,000 homes using the North Star environment, I think that sort of pushes back any question, which also ties into the stability and the concern about the financial. The back office operation. I mean, clearly, they're meeting their audit requirements, they're meeting their functional and operational requirements. I just think that's just some other point of reference in case anybody had any questions about whether or not this small niche company, could handle that particular size.
Are we able to talk to that community?
What's that? No, I got this last night.
Oh, no,
so,
but are we able to?
Yeah, this is one of the things where we.
I'm going to use you two as an example.
Yeah, so
you two together with your experience, are you able to talk to that community?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it shouldn't just be us two. It needs to be somebody else who's going to ask a business question. Okay? I don't care about the technology comes and goes. Okay? Right. Business requirements are standard. They have been since the 1800s. Okay? Standard business practices. Okay? So I'm not so much worried about the technology. I'm worried about can the solution meet your business requirements. All right?
I would like to just hear their soup to nuts of how they're, I know what he's saying, but I want to hear what they think.
Yeah.
I'm
right, and that's why he gave me the contact information.
I think it's a great contact.
All right, so we look at that and go, guys, we're getting ready to make a decision on North Star. Share your experience.
I agree.
Okay.
for me to entertain North Star solution for a back office, I would have to have some fundamental information provided. And I think I've put forward those questions. I would certainly want, because they are privately held company, I would want their financials. I want to see basically how stable they are financially. What's their debt to equity ratio. I would want to check their references, especially talking to customers that have gone through a migration from their old legacy system to a North Star, just to see what kind of experience they had. And I would want their product roadmap to see from a development investment point of view, where are they putting their emphasis? Where is their resource? Yeah, where is their resource, and how important is that to us as an organization? Because it's going to be helpful to know from our operational perspective, are we going to be seeing enhancements forthcoming in the areas that are very important for us? Maybe not now, but in the future, because that's going to help us make decision on other best-of-breed front office modules. So the key, and I'm back to my earlier point, the back office, I'm reluctant to make a decision that would support somebody like them, just because of them being a proprietary, closely held company and their software being in a marketplace relatively short time when compared to what you and I know are industry standard leading back office ERP systems. And having answers to some of these questions, I think would put, the entire board at ease.
Yeah, so my response, yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand your aversion to their back office requirements, but you don't have to explain it. It's okay. I think where we go with this is to cite information from these contacts, all right, and go, listen, have you been able to have a successful audit, okay, over the past several years using the software? What other things you use it? We have a concept about it, and we have our business processes, and we're trying to match that concept and those business processes to this technology. How did you guys use it in this? Show me the things that worked. Show me the things that didn't work, okay? And so I don't automatically assume that their back office is going to be deficient, okay? I assume that they've got customers that are doing standard business, back office, financial functions, and certainly red flags would have been raised had they not. And again, going back to the answers in the RFP too, so that's another reference point. So I don't necessarily agree with the concern about the back office, but I think that we absolutely, as a board, our due diligence is to reach out to those customers and pose those questions so we're comfortable with it.
Let me just give you one example, because I think it's good for all of us to know. What we heard from the Budget and Finance Committee and from our Director of Finance is that we are running fund accounting. We're a nonprofit running a fund accounting. We want to make sure that basically, that their back office solution is actually able to provide some of the features and functionalities that are very unique and specific to the fund accounting. And if it's not, how does that affect us and the way we run our finances and the way we do our budgeting? So this is just one single example where I think question asked and proper answer received would be very helpful to have.
Yeah, ask it again, and the idea is that question was also asked in the evaluation, with the department heads a long time ago, but I would support asking it again. Esther?
I think you guys are both saying the same thing, so we can just move on from this. Your questions are valid. I think that email is something we were missing. I think it's great. I think we got it. We have people that we can talk to now. I'm really concerned. I want to hear the migration. I want to hear about how that went. So I think that contact, that answers the next step to me, and let's move on.
Frank?
I guess this question has to go to JB. So to meet your timeline that you and your team have asked for, what we're basically saying is we need you as close as humanly possible to create 2 boxes that do the same thing. One box using the recommendation from you and your team and any adjunct programs that they need, whether it be Easy Golf, TZ Golf, Wheezy Golf, okay? Anything from Public Works that's not included that were in the TWG interviews, the ORD issue with Toast, I mean, the whole 9 yards. I mean, this is the package that I want as an operations team, okay? Now, to ask Legume Norman to do the exact same thing, and they may say, go take a hike, we're not going to do the exact same thing, but for them to do the exact same thing, and we need these bottom line costs, okay? Can that be done in the time frame that you have specified for us that you want a decision?
Hey, Frank, would you accept this as the framework for all of those questions? Because that's basically what this is. It's a list of 60-some-odd requirements, and it's got what North Star said and what L&N said. Maybe we add another column in here as comments or decision points or other things that have to go along with that, because there's no sense in reinventing the wheel when all of that's already here.
Yeah, no, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's done and that's good work. That's not what I'm exactly looking for, because here's, I guess, let me kind of cut to the chase. At the end of the deal, I think this is far, far, far more than $1 million endeavor, okay? So, and let's talk about, I mean, let me get, I guess, into the weeds, okay? If HR needs a package to interface with North Star, to do what HR has to do to manage this organization effectively, from JB and his team, for us to make a decision, I expect him and his team to come up with the name of that package, a confirmation from both that vendor and North Star that those things will talk with each other without a manual interface, a cost for it, and a prospective schedule for implementation. Same thing with Toast. If the ORT has the, first off, one of my questions is, has the ORT group looked at North Star for managing the food and beverage operation? If not, are they comfortable that they want Toast, the same thing, cost, implementation schedule? So at the end of the day, what we have is, and by the way, I know this is going to be a big number and it's going to be frightening to a lot of people, but I want the number, I want how long it's going to take to get everything done, and what the best recommendation is for getting everything in that system for us to make a decision, because I think the first part of that is going to be a big commitment that looks like it's going to be 7 digits. Then I want Legume and Norman to say, and JB's team, to get the exact same thing from you, which may be entirely different elements, but we can do this, but here's going to be our cost over the same time period. Then I think we're ready to sit down and do what the board's supposed to do, which is take the operation recommendation, understanding that the operations group is going to have to change, because I don't think people are going to change their software to match something that was done in 1960, and say, we think this is the best thing to do, given the risk evaluation that we have to do, the potential impact on the organization, and giving an exit plan if it doesn't work as scheduled. Can you do that?
Let me answer that, try to keep it simple. We've got a lot of general questions that would apply to both entities, North Star and Legume Norman, some of the contractual stuff. Then we've got specific questions for North Star. We have specific questions for Legume Norman. My task, our task, somebody's task, is to consolidate that and get those shipped out. Both the general questions to both and the specific questions to the respective parties. And December 13th, goes back to one of the questions that Mr. Vola asked, and that was December 13th, the department heads, and myself and others, we're all going to be meeting with North Star separately, or privately, whether it's this room or somewhere else, to talk specific to departmental needs again with North Star. And then to me, we need to do the same thing. Let me back up. The next day, December 14th, it's for pretty much anybody and everybody to take a look at North Star. And the intent, basically, they have several days at least to be able to prepare and answer most of these questions next Friday for North Star. We need to do, if we're going to have L&N come in and do the same type of demonstration, if you would, we need this. That's one question that I hadn't gotten to yet, Mr. President, was I need to know today if we're going to do that with L&N, because if we're going to do that before Christmas, I need to know today. If it's going to be in January, so be it. But so if we can't make that decision today, okay, we're probably going to be in January talking to L&N. But based upon that type of timeline, I think we can have answers to everything, continue checking references and doing other research so that the board can make a decision in the middle of January. You're going to be together a lot in January anyway, with budget. So we got time to squeeze something else in.
All right, so let me ask my colleagues here. Number one, we have this litany of questions, okay? Some of them have been answered. You know, some of them are still outstanding. Some of them, quite frankly, don't apply because they're operational in nature, okay? My hope was, out of this meeting, was to take, and I'll just make up a number, we got 30 questions here, you know, figure out how many we want to take forward to L&N and North Star, okay, because some of these have already been answered, and I go back to this chart, all right, has everything that all the evaluation criteria, okay, and you know, get to the point where we don't have all these, because like a lot of these questions don't even apply anymore or they've been answered. So we need to distill it down into some basic functions. And then furthermore, and this is where I look for opinions, would be we're getting this demonstration, okay? We'll have some feedback, hopefully, from the department heads that, JB, you can bring to the meeting on the 14th when we all sit around. Then we're going to have that demo on the 14th, and hopefully it will have asked and answered several more of those questions. And the idea would be, for your opinion, at that point, we've got a set of questions that are viable for L&N, rather than, you know, asking them. In other words, rather than giving them 35 questions and, you know, 20 of them don't even count, and 15 of them, and especially given the time frame, the idea is we distill this list down into the, you know, the very, very important questions that are going to be key in our comparative analysis. Slobodan.
Thanks, Doug. You know, this might be a good time for us to maybe spend certain time discussing Legum and Norman, because we really focused a lot on the North Star advantages and disadvantages, but we didn't share with each other how we feel about their offer. And that maybe will then give us the answer, you know, whether we even want to go back to them with a set of questions, and if so, what set of questions are the most important that a decision, you know, driven, which is going to help us decide if we want to keep them in play as an alternative or not. So I'll start with my personal observation on Legum and Norman. What I like about them is the fact that it does offer an outsourcing option. So if we do want to go with that model and free up our resources and turn it over to a third party to run everything, that's the solution. Where I have issue with their option, number one is cost. The entry point is very high. The ongoing costs are high. Everything is a la carte, and it's going to cost. Everything they do adds to the annual operating costs. Two is the technology. You and I know, you know, it's a desktop application suite. So we're talking about the old client server that's basically wrapped around certain web services to look like it's a cloud, but it's really not. So I do have a concern that whether we are stepping back into an old technological platform and not taking advantage of what's happening in a marketplace today. So if I factor in the technology and if I factor in the cost versus the advantage of using them to outsource our back office operations, I think the negatives outweigh the positives. And unless we have room to renegotiate financially with them, right now I'm more in favor of going with the best of breed, state-of-the-art modern solution that provides us with as much as we need to really improve our operations and run it in-house with a cloud services option.
Esther.
Okay. I'd like to do the apples-to-apples comparison. So if we're going to have North Star come in, we should have L&N come in. Same questions go to both. That email that you got is really a key point to me, and I'd like to see something like that from L&N. Do they have communities that are our size that we can also talk to see their experience? I think we're to that point right now. I think we're to the point, let's talk to people who do it, you know, both of them, and really get good feedback. I think once we talk to these communities, I think it's going to give us a much clearer picture on both of them.
Colette had her hand up. Colette?
Yes, thanks. I think Slobodan raised some good points. But I do believe that we're at the point where we need to get the comparison, whittle down those questions to those that really need to be answered, and move on to the next step. I think we're beginning to beat a dead horse here.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Frank, go ahead. I have one more comment.
Yeah, I think, again, we need the comparison, because quite frankly, I don't understand what L&N does and what their full capabilities are. One thing that kind of struck me as odd, I mean, two things that kind of struck me, not knowing them, is they have supposedly 530 standard reports, and they also talk about supporting municipal public utility groups. And I think the biggest area of concern that I have is I don't see anything in North Star that really does an effective job of supporting public works. Maybe that's buried in those 530 standard reports, and maybe it knocks a whole lot of cost off in a cost comparison. So until I understand, and that's why I asked the question to JB, can you get us, and I understand, look, life is not perfect, so we're not going to be looking at two perfect squares, but let's try to get two squares as perfect as humanly possible with you and your staff, and get the cost for those squares initial and ongoing, so we can make a decision like a board's supposed to make a decision. And I need that information, and until we ask the question, I don't think we're going to get the information to my satisfaction.
Doug, could I add some background here to just, again,
Tom, please.
I think it's important to recognize that one of the things that did happen in this flow of the work, this whole project, was that the Budget and Finance Committee suggested that we go to Legum & Norman and ask to take a look at their software. So we could do an apples to apples as best we could with I think their company, ATG, I think was the name of their version of North Star. Right. And to be kind, their response to the equivalent of an RFP as to what their software does and doesn't do, their response was, in general, well, we're not sure until we study you more thoroughly how to answer these questions. Now, so the only reason I'm providing this background is so we have to understand that JB's up against a wall, that if these folks give him the same answer that was given to us last July, I believe it was, when we got that response, there were virtually no answers in there. I mean, it was all pay us to come in and evaluate you, or do a consulting firm, or do something, then we'd be more than happy to come in and give you a price. The gentleman, I think it was Frank, who made the comment, there are times that you don't want a customer. Well, in my personal opinion, the response that was given by ATG to Ocean Pines was a statement, we're in the consulting business and the replacement of management business. We are not in the business of being a software provider to other people. So please understand that JB is going to be up against quite a hurdle to try to get to your apples to apples, because that's what we tried to do last June and July, and we're not able to get there because, quite frankly, ATG didn't answer the questions. So give it a shot, but I think that background's, because three of you are brand new to this and weren't involved with what was going on back then. So hopefully that helps with a little background.
All right, Frank and then Steve.
Tom, I understand exactly what you're saying, and my thing is, JB, you go ask them the questions, and the ball's in their court to give you the answers, and if they don't give you the answers, they're out of consideration. End of story. I mean, we're not going to chase somebody around to do work for us.
Steve.
Slobodan, I'd like to hear you unpack a little bit more. You just threw a big wrench in the middle of it, in my mind, in terms of they're mostly a hardware-based system versus a web system or approach. To me, that's a big issue.
Oh,
I mean, that puts Legum & Norman right out the door.
Well, all right. So I was going to actually make a comment on that. You know, I wasn't going to get too much into the technology weeds, but they are a client-based system, okay? For those of you know, that means that the desktop has to have a program on it, all right? In this case, it's called the client, installed on every one of the computers that are going to access the system and use it for those functions, okay? So first of all, I mean, if you unpack it, that means that you're going to have to intervene on every single system within our environment, all right? You're going to have the labor to put all that in. you're going to have the support on each one of those things as going forward. So these are all not.
But Doug, versus what? Like, explain to us
All right,
layman, okay?
all right, let me-
Yeah.
and I'll get to that, okay? You know, and the cost associated with that going forward to support. So those are not cash out the door costs, they're operational and labor costs, okay, that are in the sort of scheme of time, you know, and potential inability to use the system, okay? So those kinds of things. Versus the fully cloud-based system, which says, all I need is a browser, okay? Whether it's Microsoft Edge, IE11, Safari, Chrome, whatever, okay? I just need to log on to the system. It also becomes device agnostic. I can use this, I can use this, I can use that to get to the system from anywhere.
What's a negative to the cloud-based versus the client-based?
There aren't any.
Okay, that's what
All
I
right,
thought, okay.
all right, because the idea here is it reduces that individual intervention of client-server support, okay? Now, what I don't know, and I will tell on myself, in the LNN solution, I don't know if they had any requirement for a hardware footprint here on-prem. I don't think they did, all right? But it depends, because they had mentioned Citrix, which is a virtual desktop technology, okay, as a way to access it. Just think of it as you put the client up here on this virtual desktop, and then you guys access it from that way. But that still has, you know, support, because you need the ICA client. I didn't want to get into too much technical detail. The idea here is just thinking this way: the cloud-based solution from an operational perspective and from a support perspective is much more efficient, much more effective, requires far less support, all right, and gives you that flexibility that a client-server system, you know, client-server, and I remember an article that I helped write with, we called it Client-Server 1.0, when some of the things came back and said, you know, they're starting to put these functions in here, and it's like they're regressing back into the client-server days. But,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Why do some, just to give my education, why do some still use client-server instead of cloud? I don't understand the reasoning.
There's a myriad of reasons. One would be that they haven't fully embraced a lot of the technologies that are associated with a web-based environment.
Okay.
You know, REST APIs, SOAP, you know, all those other things that, again, don't want to get into too much of the weeds here, but they've established somewhat of a legacy environment that they've supported and are not ready to move over to really, you know, endorse the web-based services and abandon their client-server, you know, sort of legacy technology. And it's all an individual decision on companies as they move forward. You know, clearly, the push has been in the whole IT industry is to reduce your footprint and your support costs internally, because they can be absorbed by a subscription-based service, okay? SaaS, you know, and all those other things. You're pushing all of that operational responsibility. Quite frankly, you're getting it back in spades, you know? For example, a server goes down here, okay? You have an intervention. You got to get the staff on site. Hopefully the staff is internal. If it's not, you have to get your external provider. You're losing time. Well, that's all built into the cloud environment, okay? They're monitoring that environment. It's running 24/7 by 365 without any of us, you know, OPA staff resources from an IT perspective having to worry about that, okay? Hell, there's a whole industry on monitoring. You know, alert sites, Smart Bear, all those kinds of, I mean, we could go on, but the point being is, and let me put the Reader's Digest version.
Please.
The web-based environment with a cloud-based back-end is the way to go.
And
That is
LNN doesn't have that.
LNN doesn't
web-based.
have that right now.
Okay, and
LNN's
North
requiring a client on every one of the
Okay,
workstations.
now I understand.
Okay?
And this is why I prefaced my comment earlier by, you know, to me, I see the attractiveness of LNN offering only from an outsourcing perspective, if we wanted to turn over the back office to a third party with their resources. If that is not our most important decision driver, and we need to factor other key decisions, other key factors, then I'm less interested in Leggett & Norman because of what I believe is huge one-time entry cost and recurring costs. That can really run up the tab, and two, obviously, the technology.
Let me add one more thing, just for the rest of the board members, to slow down's point. I extract this. This came out of the LNN one. These are all of the a la carte items, okay? And JB, I didn't think you could get the data that quick enough, but I asked JB, how many, you know, of these do we do on a monthly basis? You know, an appraisal report, covenants compliance, first closing package, government. Yeah, you listen, because all these are extra charges. Every time we do one of these with LNN, they're gonna send us an invoice, okay? And so to help quantify what you're talking about, Frank, I'd ask JB, can we at least get some estimates, based on this stuff? Because those are those additional costs where, and I'd also want a line that says, built into North Star, no, will be an additional cost with North Star, okay? And that, I think, hopefully that will provide you some additional information. I'm quite frankly looking at that going, I'd want to really get an estimate on a monthly basis as to what, over and above that, the number that they gave us is going to cost us to run the operation.
But what you're saying, Doug, going back to that, based on, and again, forgive me because I'm learning as I'm going here, but it seems like L&N truly isn't an option, starting number one, that it's not web-based, based on what you just described to me. That sounds like a huge issue.
Yeah, and I could say that, but I'd be remiss if I said, don't think of it just in the technology. You have to think of it in the business side as well. Again, as a CIO, I don't have the luxury of just technology. It's the business of it, okay? So you have to marry both, okay? And go back to my comment earlier.
Yeah.
Technology comes and goes. Business processes are pretty standard among the industry. JB.
Doug, to address the Leggett & Norman, but it'll be any other management company, the additional fees. Some of those we can get at, and staff is already working up a response to some of the internal questions that we have. How many transactions do we do with those types of things? But some of those fees are not paid by the association. They are paid by the case of a disclosure statement by the seller, the member. A lot of the other fees that are associated with a management company are paid by the member, not by the association. And some of those things that they charge for, we actually don't charge for and are included in what we do, or are included in a fee that is for something else. Mm-hmm. So there's not that is a hard to get at apple to apple type of thing. One of the examples that I have given in the past, and I will continue to give as an example, is that wholesale resale disclosure packets. Now, a while back, we went through the process of how we do that internally, and then I'm signing those, we can charge $250 for those resale disclosure documents. Well, we actually have, by law, 20 days to turn those around at $250. If it's 14 days or less that you want it, then it's an extra $50. And Leggett & Norman would charge that. So all those different tier pieces that they have on their proposal. That makes it $300. If you want it in 7 days or less, it's $350 total instead of $250. We turn them around in less than 5, mostly with less than 5 days, sometimes up to 7, but we don't charge anything extra for that, though we could. So how does that factor into that math equation? You would extrapolate, all right, this is how many resale documents that we did versus transfers. You factor that in, and if we were to say to Leggett & Norman, again, and to any other management company, we want them all turned around in less than a week, and we don't want you to charge the seller any additional fee other than the $250. They're going to back in that extra amount into their baseline fee that the association is paying versus the seller. So again, all sorts of stuff like that makes it hard to get to an apples to apples.
Understood.
So,
I just want to play off of what Tom said earlier, because he made a very important point that I think I have overlooked in the process of evaluating L&M option, not just the technology, client-server platform, but the fact that they're looking at us and our needs as a sort of one-off. The advanced technology group that Tom referred is basically, to them, we are a customer that has some unique requirements that are outside of their usual offering. So you're no longer now in a COTS, commercial off-the-shelf kind of a customer.
Make sure you say that, because
commercial off-the-shelf situation. You're now a custom project, custom development. That in itself is going to generate some, expenditure that is not going to be low. And whenever you are in a unique custom relationship, it's really what we're trying to stay away from, because we had plenty of that with BDK. Every time we ask for something, Lensa needs to be used. You got to develop proprietary code to do anything. We don't want that. We want to get away from those things. We want to get as much COTS as possible. We want to use, bless you, industry standard APIs if they're available that are basically open source code instead of proprietary, so we have the freedom of doing things if we want to change modules later on. These are all very important things from a technical implementation point of view, but you know, that's why I kind of went on record saying that unless we want to outsource our back office, to me, L&M becomes less attractive, not because their solution is necessarily not good, but it's very expensive, technology is outdated, and I think what we want is what Northstar and the likes of Northstar are offering: cloud, web-based, standard, off-the-shelf, easy to maintain, easy to upgrade, easy to support. Those are all huge pluses.
Yeah, it goes back to what I said earlier about purpose-built versus custom-developed. But Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I know the answer to this already, but basically if we go web-based, we already have all the hardware we need to accomplish the task.
Yes.
Okay, good. I would like to suggest that we pursue getting our questions answered to Northstar on the 14th, that we don't even approach L&M at this point for any further questions, but we just go down the road, and after the 14th, if our questions aren't answered, then we got to step back and figure out what the next option is. But for now, I would say let's go for Northstar, let's look at it, let's study it, let's get our questions answered, and then we decide, do we want to go with them? If we don't want to go with them, then we start all over again.
Frank?
Generally, I agree, but I think we could do one caveat without wasting too much time, and I think that it ties into something that Tom said from his work on the TWG and this discussion about are we a one-off, and that is just simply ask L&N, do you consider us a one-off? And if you do, what is in your standard package, and how much would we have to change? Because if we're looking at a custom solution versus a one-off, I mean, you know, maybe they have something, and I say maybe because I don't know what they have. Maybe they have a community that has the amenities that are similar to ours. But maybe that would require us to do some changes. But maybe that would also reduce their cost by 50%. So just ask the question. And if they say, look, you're a one-off, and because you have Public Works, because you have this, and this, you're going to be a one-off, then I think that Steve hit the nail on the head. Go that way. And we're saying we're going to go best of breed and try to find a best of breed software. But let's at least ask them the question of coming in with what I'd call a standard rather than, is it possible to come in with a standard rather than a custom solution?
Let me approach that. So two things. One, I'm going to sound negative, is they had that opportunity, all right? They had that opportunity when the RFP, and also if you look at all of these answers, you know, where they're basically saying, well, we're a consulting company, we'll have to come in and determine. All right, that tells me right away, either A, that they don't have the capability and they're trying to figure out what it is that they need to add to their current environment. And that's a red flag right there, you know. Either say, or just say, no, we don't support it. So they had that opportunity. If they were being an aggressive, you know, sort of customer-seeking entity, I think they would have reached out to us and said, hey, why don't we sit down and have a meeting? In other words, all the meetings don't have to be originated by us. They could have come to us and said, listen, hey, we want to spend some time with you guys to better understand. Here's the answer we provided, and by the way, I want an opportunity to maybe vet this a little bit more, explain a little more. We got none of that, okay? So when I'm looking at a vendor analysis, somebody doesn't do that kind of stuff, you know. Now, I'm not saying that what Larry said is 100% true, but it's certainly part of my decision-making process. If you make this number $7 million, I mean, you know, I don't want to do it, okay, no problem. But the other part of when I'm evaluating a vendor is how responsive they are, you know, given the certain situation. They had an opportunity to come in and say, hey, guys, we're not really 100% sure exactly what you're asking, rather than this sort of bland, you know, boilerplate response, we'll have to do more discovery. You know, so what? I mean, I can interpret that, oh, you know, for what? $700 an hour? I mean, tell me what the, yeah, so you left me as a customer, a potential customer, with a lot more questions that, quite frankly, as a professional organization, I don't take kindly to. Go ahead.
Swell. Take a breath, Doug. Okay.
I do that occasionally.
All right, let's just wrap this up. I agree. You know what? I was really an initial fan of L&N, and I will say that very publicly. But, and I know Director Trendick, we talked about it at length. I think L&N's off the table, and I do agree with what you said, Doug. I don't chase vendors for my businesses. It's not my job to chase them. It's their job to chase me. And responsiveness. If that's an indication of how you're going to address a problem with us, I got a real problem with that. So, to try to wrap this up today, I would like to talk to the other communities that are using North Star. Let's get the questions answered, let's wrap this up, and then we can make a decision. And I think that's kind of where we're just, we're talking, and it's 10 o'clock, and I need another cup of coffee, so let's.
There's coffee right
I
there,
think
stick around.
I think we've discussed it all we can, but I agree with Doug that I think L&N had their opportunity, it's time to move.
I would say this, if you guys are comfortable, I'm comfortable with taking them off the table. I mean, you know, if the ground has been plowed, there's no, the time for repiling is long past.
Exactly.
All right, tell you what, since I think we've kind of talked, I think everybody had an opportunity. Ted, Colette, any final comments?
No, I agree that it's time to just take L&N off the table and do our due diligence with North Star and see where it takes us.
Ted?
Yeah, and I agree with Steve's look at this thing. Let's go ahead and get all the answers, plug all the holes, get the total amount of money, and if it doesn't work, then we move back to another solution somewhere, which may still be cloud-based.
Okay. All right, around the table real quick. Steve, final comments?
That's it. I'm ready to go.
Frank?
I'm okay, let's go.
JB?
Thanks for including me. I think, you know, we've got plenty of questions. We've got things set up for North Star for next Thursday and Friday, both internally with the staff as well as with the board and everybody else that wants to be able to see what they're up, what they present. I think you can make a decision from that.
Slobodan?
I am looking forward to talking to references. I want to know exactly what their experiences have been with the migration and, more importantly, with the back office. You know, and I think, I'm sure people like Steve Phillips, John Viola will want to talk to their CFO to find out whether from a back office accounting, financing, budgeting point of view, North Star is really, you know, hit the nail on the head, or whether they're disappointed in that, because I'm still kind of torn between going with a standard leading back office and then let North Star cover all the other modules that are related to our front office. So I'm kind of deferring my thoughts on this till actually I do the references, I get the financials. We are under non-disclosure from what I remember with them. We can get their annual report, vet them out at the business level, and make sure that, you know, we are comfortable with making that investment with them.
Esther?
Yep, let's move on. I'm good. Let's go.
All right, so in closing, first of all, thanks to my colleagues here. I think this was a very good discussion. Hopefully, the fact that it was held as a working session and involved, you know, folks from the community is a benefit. You know, I think hopefully people got an understanding of the complexity involved in this, but also in the level of effort that went to get us to this point. I think we've covered all of our due diligence points, and I just, you know, again, thank everybody for their time and their input. I think in closing, we got a meeting on the 13th for the staff, the 14th for us, and for those listening, the meeting on the 14th is a public meeting. It's a public, so it's not just a, you know, for other people. Anybody that wants to sit in and do the demo for North Star, they're more than welcome to attend. And then I think after that, we'll either A, have a set of questions that we want to take to L&N, or B, have decided that L&N is basically off the table, and then our due diligence is to move forward. So again, thanks everyone. I appreciate it. And
I want to know how we're going to move forward with getting questions. Is there, like, we've got all, this sheet I put together is way more than what we would want to give to.
Right.
So how is this getting refined and prepared in order to give to?
So let me offer that take your top two, okay? Take your top two questions, all right? And then we'll just put that together and decide whether or not that covers all the areas. So
here's what I would like to do. I'll put forward my questions that I feel are mandatory for me. And then, you know, let's consolidate and see if everybody's happy with the final version. But there's some that I really, you know, want to have go.
Question, are any questions that you're coming up with not already on this one? Will there be new
No,
questions?
I don't think so.
All right, so you're
I need
distilling
to
it
look at
down?
my list
Okay,
of 7
all right, all
and
right.
just figure out whether I want
Fair
to
enough,
distill
yeah.
that further or leave it.
All right, so let's do that. That way, the idea is to come up with a sort of Reader's Digest version of the questions, because a lot of these are answered. Oh, by the way, I suspect that I'd like to think that a lot of these questions will, diminish even further, because after the demo, many of them will probably have been answered. So,
Between now and next Friday, they'll either get something back from
Right.
North Star, or they'll be able to answer
right,
them
all
on
right?
Saturday.
So let's look at it that way. So that being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.